My name is Ginevra Wetmore, and you have come to a Green Drinks event hosted by Sustainable Woodstock. We are a nonprofit organization founded in 2009. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and empower everyone to live environmentally, economically, and socially responsible lives. So welcome. We're very happy to have you all. Green Drinks are monthly social events to connect folks who have similar interests in the environment. We invite local nonprofits, businesses, and individuals to make short presentations that highlight their sustainability and other green initiatives in our area. So just as a brief plug, our next Green Drinks is May 19th and will be about the Thompson Center's micro transit pilot and their home share program. The Thompson Center offers a variety of supportive services through their Aging at Home program, including an upcoming micro transit project with Tri-Valley Transit, which is very exciting. So join us next month to learn more about that. I'll send that information in a follow-up email. So for tonight, before we get started, I'm just going to run through the meeting and how it's going to operate. So right now we are recording. Let me double check. Yes, we are. Excellent. Right now we are recording. So you should also be muted. If you do have questions as the presenters speak, please just type those in the chat of Zoom. So if you don't have that open, you should be able to scroll over the window, and at the bottom, there should be a little chat bubble you can click on, or you can click the ... more. And if you open that, you should be able to open your chat function. Please type any questions into that chat function as we go. And after our two presenters have spoken, myself and our director, Michael Caduto, will pose your questions to them. I think that's the most important bit. I will follow up afterwards with the recording of this event and any other information that Jen and David want me to send out. I will email out to everyone who is registered. So I think that is it. Mostly for me, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our two presenters. So we have Jenn Yandow and David Roberts with us tonight. So Jenn is joining us from Green Mountain Power, where she has been involved with their electric vehicle programs since 2014, helping customers charge forward and move into an EV with ease, whether it be understanding what charging at home can be or helping employers with charging at work options. She welcomes the conversation. So that's Jenn. And then we're going to also have David. David Roberts is the Drive Electric Vermont Coordinator at VEIC. He works with utilities, government agencies, and other organizations to advance transportation electrification, including consumer outreach, incentive programs, dealer education, and charging infrastructure development. He has supported over 150 EV events across Vermont over the past 10 years and enjoys keeping up with the latest EV industry developments. That's cool, 150 events. You must have sat down and counted that, Dave. So we are going to have David present first, then Jenn, and then we'll open it for questions. It was Dave's idea to give you all a poll. So to poll everyone who's attending tonight, which I've never done before, but I'm going to go ahead and launch it. There it goes. So it's going to ask you two questions. Have you ever been for a ride in an electric vehicle? And do you already have an electric vehicle in your household? So that's fun. Wow, it's great to watch these all come in. Should I give the percents, I suppose, that I'm seeing so far? 64% of people have been in an electric vehicle, 36 haven't. And in terms of people who already have electric vehicles, 20% do, 80% do not. So that's very interesting. Thank you all for answering that. And I guess I will let you go ahead. Dave, take it away.
All right, thanks, Ginevra, and hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to join you tonight. And great to see that so many of you at least have some experience with EVs. About 2/3 have at least been for a ride, and we have about 20% who have already made the switch. So good on you, and hopefully this won't be too remedial. We don't have a ton of time tonight, so I'm going to try to run through just some of the basics in about 15 minutes or so, and then I'll hand it off to Jenn, who will speak a little bit more about some of the Green Mountain Power programs and their experiences. So we want to make sure that we have time for questions at the end. So that's why I'll be moving fairly quickly, but hopefully not too fast. And I will share the PDF of my slides with Ginevra so she can send them out to everybody following the meeting. So if you don't need to worry about taking notes if you don't want to. So I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. And if somebody could give me a thumbs up that you're seeing this. All right, thank you. So a little bit about Drive Electric Vermont. We're a public-private partnership established in 2012 with the EIC, which is a Vermont-based nonprofit. We work out of Winooski. We also operate the Efficiency Vermont energy efficiency utility, for those of you who may be familiar with that. So between Drive Electric Vermont was organized originally between VIC and the state of Vermont, but we work with many folks across the state, utilities, other non-governmental organizations and drivers, and doing a lot of work to support more transportation electrification. And we've got a website. I put a link in the chat to our website. Lots of great resources on there. And in terms of some of the kind of just basic reasons why folks are making the switch to electric vehicles, the state is working to reduce emissions, both greenhouse gas and other harmful tailpipe emissions, and EVs are one way to do that. They have great performance. Electric motors have a lot of zip. They're a lot of fun to drive. So hopefully if you haven't had a chance to go for a ride in one or drive one, really encourage you to try to do that at some point. You'll see how much fun they are to drive. They're quiet, so you can listen to music, have a conversation. It's just a more enjoyable driving experience for most people. You can charge them at home, as we'll hear a little bit more about. So it's sort of always ready to go. A lot of people think about it kind of like a cell phone, where you plug it in when you get home or at night, and then it's just ready to go in the morning. So you can skip the gas station, and there are some issues if you're doing a lot of long distance travel, but charging infrastructure along highways is getting better and will continue to grow significantly in the next few years. And of course, right now with gas prices, they are coming down a little bit, but they've certainly increased substantially in the last few months. And driving an electric vehicle on average is the equivalent about $1.50 a gallon gasoline in Vermont. So significant savings on fuel as well as maintenance and other costs. They do tend to cost more upfront than comparable gasoline vehicles, but there are a number of incentive programs that I'll run through toward the end of my presentation that help bring down those costs, in some cases to lower upfront cost even than similar gasoline vehicles. So I mentioned emissions. Transportation is the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the state. It's about 45%. And making the switch to an electric vehicle on average in the US is somewhere around a 60 to 70% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions over the life of the vehicle. So that includes the battery production, which I know there are some issues and concerns around, and I'm happy to talk more about that in the Q&A if folks want to get into it. And as our electric grid gets increasingly clean and renewable, as you get up to, like we were just talking before the session, Jenn is in Swanton, which is 100% renewable electricity. As you get into areas that have those higher renewable shares, you can see even higher reductions. So an all-electric or battery-powered EV can provide about an 80% reduction if it's powered with 100% renewable energy. There's an important note at the top right of this slide is just to point out that reducing vehicle travel is the most efficient way to address transportation emissions. So driving less by walking, bicycling, carpooling, public transportation, those are all options that are called out as really important strategies in the Vermont Climate Action Plan. So I'm certainly not here to say that EVs are the only solution, but for folks who are driving, it's a much cleaner option than a conventional gasoline vehicle. Two basic types that are available in the marketplace today. There's the all-electric, which are powered solely by the battery. There are growing numbers of models that have, well over 200 miles of range is sort of the standard for new vehicles. And there are a number of models that have 3, even pushing 400 miles of range now as battery packs improve and some efficiency improvements are happening. Plug-in hybrids are the other sort of major type. They're able to run on battery for maybe 15 to 80 miles, depending on the model. Typically, it's somewhere 20 to 40 miles, which is enough for a lot of people's daily travels kind of around town. And then if you're on a longer road trip, they do have a gasoline engine that basically powers the vehicle, either sort of working as a generator or actually driving the wheels as more like a normal gasoline car would. So, if you're on a long trip, you can just fuel with gasoline if you need to. So historically, plug-in hybrids have been sort of the more popular option in Vermont, but as we see more affordable, longer range all electrics coming into our market, we now have about a 50-50 split between all electric and plug-in hybrids as of January of this year. And just to give you some ideas about the models that we have in the state, few options listed here on the left, all electric, on the right, plug-in hybrids. Typically $30,000 to $40,000 for those kind of more affordable models, and that's any new vehicle today. They tend to be in that $40,000 range. So again, even gasoline cars have really significantly increased in price over the past few years. Some of the newer models that are just kind of either have been here for a little while or are just getting into the market or about to start sales in Vermont are shown here. I think all of these have all-wheel drive options, which are really popular in Vermont. A little bit higher ground clearance in some circumstances. There's been a lot of interest in the F-150 Lightning pickup truck, which is supposed to start shipping later this month to people who have sort of pre-sales or reserved their vehicle. Ford actually stopped taking reservations because it had so much interest, but they should be reopening that at some point, and there will be some other electric pickup truck options coming to market. We've got a tool on the Drive Electric Vermont website, driveelectricvt.com, that is our vehicle comparison, and it includes most of the vehicles that are available at Vermont dealers today. So it doesn't include some of those future vehicles like the F-150. We don't include them until they actually start shipping to customers, because sometimes there are delays and uncertainties in pricing and things like that. But it's a good tool to kind of get a sense for what's out there. You can filter to show longer range, different vehicle types, which ones have all-wheel drive, things of that sort. And there are links off to the automaker websites where you can learn, a lot more detailed information about individual models. Lots of other electric options out there in Vermont, starting to see more electric buses, starting to see also commercial vehicles like the F-150 Lightning, but also work vans and things of that sort. Jen might talk about some of the incentive programs that GMP has for some of the other sort of home use or personal use electric options. I won't dwell on those here, but happy to answer questions. Important thing to keep in mind for Vermonters especially is that cold weather does reduce the range of electric vehicles. They use lithium-ion batteries, which are just they don't work as well in cold temperatures. And we generally suggest people consider that they're going to get about half of the official manufacturer's range estimate on the coldest Vermont days. And got some tips here on this slide. On the right side, things that drivers can do to kind of boost some of their winter range. If there is an option to use a heated seat or steering wheel instead of the cabin heat, that's much more efficient. You can preheat the vehicle while it's still plugged in the morning. And that way you're not sort of hitting the battery immediately to warm up the cabin. And just driving a little bit slower on the highway especially can really increase the range. Some other cold weather issues is that many EVs will have slower fast charging in the coldest winter conditions. So, hopefully a lot of these issues may improve in the coming years as new battery technologies are being developed. But for now, important to keep in mind that you will see less range in the winter. And there's a link on the bottom of the slide to a page on the Drive Electric website, which gets into a lot more detail, provides some kind of model specific tips for people who maybe are shopping and trying to compare different models, which one's going to have a heat pump, which is more efficient than electric resistance heaters and things like that. I mentioned some of the potential cost savings for an EV. So this is looking at comparison between a gasoline vehicle and someone on the average Vermont electric rate in green. You can see that electric rates are much more stable than gasoline, which was up and down. And this is the most recent data that we had for this only ran through the end of 2021. So that purple gasoline line has gone up significantly since we were able to pull this data. But roughly, at least as of the end of 2021, somebody driving an EV would have saved about $2,000 over the last 5 years, and potentially could have saved even more if they were able to get on an off-peak rate. And I think Jen will talk a little bit more about what GMP is offering on that front. And in addition to the fuel savings, you can also have significant savings on maintenance costs. So Consumer Reports has done some really helpful research on these issues, and they found, over the life of a vehicle, total savings, including depreciation of the vehicle, which EVs may have, in some cases, higher depreciation than similar gasoline vehicles, that the total cost of ownership savings was $6,000 to $10,000 over the life of the vehicle. Talking about charging for just a few moments here, we've got most people are charging at home overnight. So that's easily in Vermont, over 80% of EV owners are doing that. In some cases, folks may not have access to home charging. If they're in an apartment or condo, it can be issues with getting charging installed. Happy to talk more about that. And, in some cases, somebody's on a longer trip. It's really helpful to have that public charging, but it's not something that most EV drivers use on a daily basis. And when we talk about charging, there are 3 levels of charging. So there's level 1 charging on the left, which just comes with every EV. It can plug into a standard home outlet, 120 volts. It's fairly slow. It'll give you about 5 miles of range per hour of charging. So if you have a plug-in hybrid or you don't have a super long commute, it can work fine. But a lot of folks prefer to go with level 2 charging, which is 240 volt, an electric clothes dryer. That'll give you, depending on the vehicle and the charging equipment, typically 10 to 20 miles of range per hour of charging. And we're fortunate for many folks in Vermont, certainly in the Woodstock area, that GMP has a great program that provides level 2 charging equipment. And Jen will talk more about that. And then at the upper end, you've got DC fast charging, which is much higher powered, much faster charging. So you would only see this usually sort of at public locations, and oftentimes sort of around along key travel corridors. In Vermont, we've got over 300 locations with public charging, and this map is from a website called plugshare.com that a lot of EV drivers use to figure out where to charge. And the orange dots on this map are where fast chargers are located. So, the map is filling in. There are still some gaps. The state has funded a number of fast chargers that hopefully would be going in this summer, if not this summer, certainly next summer, with some of the Volkswagen diesel settlement funds. A lot of these fast chargers that are currently out there today are just offering one charger. So like what's shown in the photo here on the right, that's a charger in Middlebury. As EV use grows and as the state funds are available to support it, a lot of the future fast charging that's going in will have at least 2 fast chargers, in some cases potentially 4 or more. So that'll help with some of the redundancy and reliability issues, and hopefully make it easier for folks to get a charge when they're arriving at those locations. PlugShare has a handy tool to help plan out trips. Some of the automakers build this into smartphone apps or vehicle navigation systems, but PlugShare has one really helpful feature, which is a way to kind of click on a charger and see if anybody has used it recently, and if so, what their experience has been. So that's really helpful if you're planning a long trip, you're going to be a long way from home and you're not sure, like, can I really rely on this charger or not? By taking a look at PlugShare before you go, you should usually have a decent sense of whether the charging equipment has been working or if there might be an issue with it. So in this example, last fall, there was a charger near Albany that was partially out of service. And so that's something that if you were making that trip from the Burlington area down to New York City, would have been important for you to know and plan accordingly. Shifting gears to incentives, just to kind of wrap up my remarks, there are federal, state, and utility incentives that are available. And you know, they each have their own sort of unique eligibility requirements. The federal tax credit is only available for some vehicles. General Motors and Tesla vehicles have exceeded the federal cap on how many of their vehicles are eligible for this, so not available for them anymore. But in this example, it's for Nissan Leaf, which is eligible for the full amount of that tax credit, the maximum amount, which is $7,500. Important to note, here we've got sort of the standard incentives for sort of moderate income Vermonters, and then the less than 50K income. So that's folks who are making less than $50,000 a year. They're eligible for some higher incentives. The exact income eligibility requirements can vary a bit, but just sort of to give you a ballpark, you know, this is the right side of this Leaf example is for sort of lower income households. And if you are in a lower income household, odds are decent that you may not owe $7,500 in taxes at the end of the year when you're figuring out your tax liability. So that's an important consideration. You may not get the full benefit of the federal tax credit, even if you buy a vehicle that's eligible for it. And one way that some of the lower income Vermonters who have kind of been interested in going electric have dealt with that is by leasing, in which case the leasing company is actually eligible for that tax credit and they can pass through the value of it to the buyer, or the leasee, I should say. There's also a state incentive for all electric vehicle. It's $2,500 for a lower income person or driver. It'd be up to $4,000. And then there are utility incentives. I think we'll hear more from Jenn about what GMP offers. So this is just an example for the Leaf again, but it goes from a $32,000 starting base price for the longer range Leaf Plus down to about $21,000 for the standard incentive eligible household, and $18,400 if you can get the full suite of lower income incentives, which is less expensive than sort of a comparable vehicle that we've included here, a Nissan Kicks. So, you know, once you start stacking and layering in all these incentives, it can really bring down the cost significantly. And we have a really helpful tool on the Drive Electric Vermont website to help you sort of figure out if you're buying a new or used EV. If the state does have incentives for used EVs for income eligible households through the Mileage Smart program. We've got links to you know, all the different incentive programs on this page, and this calculator tool is really helpful to, you know, kind of navigate what you might be looking at in terms of savings with an EV purchase. So that is my quick, well, fairly quick run through of some of the EV basics, and I'll hand it off to Jenn to provide a little more information on the work that they're doing at Green Mountain Power.
Gotta unmute myself.
I was just gonna say thanks so much, Dave. And yeah, take it away, Jenn.
Thank you, Dave. Always a great presentation. I think I learned something every time I listen to Dave talk. So I'm gonna share my screen now. So give me a thumbs up if you guys can see it. Thank you. Okay. There we go. So I can move past the screen quickly. Green Mountain Power, Dave mentioned that while I live in Swanton Electric territory, I'm in 100% carbon-free company as well. Green Mountain Power actually is 100% carbon-free, 68% renewable. So while our goal is 100% renewable, we're close to there. We're just not there yet, working hard to get there. We are a national leader in energy transformation. We do a lot of Smart Electric Power Alliance program stuff. You see and continue to hear press releases about all of the cool stuff we've got going on. So it's really fun to be part of a company who's forward thinking like this. So we, our primary goal is electrification cuts carbon, like Dave talked about this briefly already, but the primary way to cut carbon in Vermont is transportation. The second piece is your building thermal, right? So your house electric usage, your house energy costs. So heating, rather not electric, is your oil, your natural gas, your propane sources that you heat your house with. And then with the transportation piece being the 40%, makes a big difference when we can make the impact on those two pieces, can make a big, huge difference in the impact of what we see at the end of the day. Whoops, one too far. Why drive electric? I'm not going to repeat all of the stuff Dave said. We always have similar presentations, but you know, it is cheaper. It's fun. Driving electric vehicles is fun. I'm fortunate in that we have a number of pool vehicles available, so I can take many different electric vehicles. I get to say I drove the Kona, the Bolt, the Leaf. I drove an electric truck last summer that was really cool. Like, there's so many different options out there, and it's fun to watch the industry continue to grow. GMP makes it easy to drive electric in a couple of different ways. So David mentioned the rebates earlier. So when you buy an all electric vehicle, so 100% electric, not as in an all electric, there you can get $1,500 off a new all electric vehicle. You can get $1,000 off a new hybrid, plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. You can get an additional $1,000 on an all electric vehicle for the low to moderate income cap, which for us is household income of $96,000. For household income. That's not about how you file your taxes. That's about the household income. As I once had been told by the manager of our call center, if your dog is in a movie and he makes money, that counts as household income. So all income in the household. So up to $2,500 for a new all electric vehicle, $1,000 for the hybrids. If you buy a used, it doesn't matter if it's all electric or plug-in hybrid. We have a $750 rebate for used electric vehicles. So there's something for everyone in every way, shape, and form, because the $1,500 and the $1,000 is not income capped. And then the additional $1,000 is income capped. And then the used one is also not income capped. The only difference, that has to be registered at your Green Mountain Power account address. Your bill of sale has to show your Green Mountain Power account address. There's a lot of people who have multiple properties. If your car is registered at a different property, it does not qualify for a GMP issued incentive. So we talked about the price of gas going up today. The equivalent of a gallon of gas is $1 a gallon of gas, up to $1.05, because there's 2 electric vehicle rates available for our customers to play with. So depending which rate you choose to play in, you could be looking at $1 or $1.05 a gallon of gas equivalent, compared to, I think I saw at the pumps $4.29 the other day when I drove by, but don't quote me on that one. I'm, again, upstate Vermont. Prices might be quite different than Woodstock area. GMP also, these incentives are available for businesses as well. So the electric vehicle rebates are not just residential. So if you own a business, or if your employer is talking about buying electric vehicles, they also can get those incentives. So not just for the residential household members. Dave spoke about the charging level options. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the level 2 options. So yes, your car is going to come with that cord that plugs into a 120 outlet, and you're going to get, you know, about 5 miles of charging. Works perfectly great on an everyday recuperating of your electric draw. So I think of it this way. I get home from work at 5:30, raining here. I'm probably not going out very far. I'm going to be home for 8 to 10 hours. Plugging in on a 120 outlet will do the trick for most recharge. Level 2s, particularly for those who have an all electric vehicle. If you have teenagers in the house, or you're in and out a lot, like I'm on energy committees and DRBs, and so I come home and I leave, and I come home and I leave. Those level 2s can be more efficient for that. you're going to get in the 18 to 24 mile an hour range. So Green Mountain Power offers and provides a level 2 charger to our customers. It's not, it used to be when you purchase an electric vehicle. Now it's as long as you have an EV registered at your household. So if you bought a car in 2017, before we even had this program in existence, you can just send in a copy of your Vermont registration showing, again, Green Mountain Power account address. That's the key for us. Green Mountain Power account address on that Vermont DMV registration. We're going to send you an electronic agreement to sign. Our goal is always reduce paper. We send you that agreement, you read it thoroughly, sign it, comes back to me, we ship you a charger. Why do we do this? So it's not just about, to us, it's not about you having a faster source of charging your car. It's about us being able to control the draw on the grid during some peak events. So for example, if today is an event at 4 o'clock, we may have told electric vehicle chargers, do not deliver power. When the draw on the grid is high, buying power is high, we curtail electric vehicle chargers to help reduce that draw on the grid. We tell it 9:01, go ahead and deliver power again. You wake up in the morning, you're fully charged. It doesn't matter that it wasn't fully charged by 9 p.m. You're good to go when you leave for work in the next morning. So by being able to curtail that cost, we get to reduce the cost of buying power that we then pass on to our customers through your electric rates. So if we can curtail and not have to buy expensive power, we hope to ultimately save on your electric rates and not have the increases that others might see when they have to buy all of that high-end costly power. The other thing, so with our EV charger program, we have 2 particular chargers we work with. Those are the ones that are compatible to the virtual peaker software program that we utilize. So that software program is what allows us to tell the charger not to deliver power, but it's also what allows us to pull the kilowatt hours that your car uses from the system. So in order to give you that EV rate adjustment, we need to know exactly when your car charged, how many kilowatt hours it drew, and what time it was. So we pull the kilowatt hours draw from the system. On your electric bill, you're going to see line adjustments that say bill detail, negative electric vehicle charging at your current rate 01 rate of 17 cents, and then a positive EV rate cost of either 13.4 or 13.9 cents, depending which rate you've chosen to enroll in. So you can save 3.5 or 4 cents a kilowatt hour for your electric car charging by enrolling in one of those 2 EV rates. The reason that those chargers are the ones that are available, like I said, they're the ones compatible with virtual peaker. We often hear a lot of, I have a Tesla charger at home, how come I can't enroll in your program? The Tesla chargers, the older ones particularly, did not have technology in them. The newer ones coming forth have technology in them, but they still aren't compatible with the virtual peaker programs that a lot of utilities are using these days. So because we can't communicate with it, we can't allow it into the system. So it's pretty easy to get a charger, send us that email, we send you the agreement, pop it off in the mail to you. Cost of installing chargers, we're hearing on average $650, because it's all about the distance from your electrical panel box to your point of connection. So if you're running 10 feet of wiring versus 45 feet of wiring, you're going to be looking at 2 different dollar amounts. I talked to a customer today who received their quote for $500. Another one I talked 2 days ago, theirs was $400. So on average, we're seeing $650 if the distance is, normal 10 to 20 feet. Dave spoke about the DC fast chargers. Part of the key thing to understand about the DC fast chargers, right, is it's not a small piece of equipment. It takes 3-phase power. So as David mentioned, often in areas where like the rest areas are right off the interstates, 3-phase power is not, for example, we don't have 3-phase power all of our buildings even. Like 3-phase power is not something that's typically out the door and around the corner. It takes a little bit more voltage and juice to get these chargers into place. And while we have 14 fast chargers throughout the state of Vermont that GMP is involved with, upgrading those, we're running into that wonderful, stock issue that a lot of industries are running into. Getting the chargers to get the upgrades done is taking a little bit longer than we had hoped. But we are working towards upgrading those chargers and actually received 2 last week. So yay, we'll see those going in soon. And then we've got 2 more that came in yesterday. So yay, we'll see those going in soon. So we are all working diligently to get charging infrastructure into place. But for businesses who have the need and the desire to offer their employees the ability to charge at work, Green Mountain Power does have an incentive for those businesses as well. So we offer a $750 per port cashback incentive after level 2 chargers are installed. So if you have an employer, or if you live in a condo association and your condo association is willing to put in a charger that they will allow both the tenants or the residents and visitors. So if I stop and say hi and have a cup of tea with you and I get to plug in my car while I'm there, it's considered public in our opinion. We are offering a $750 cashback per port incentive to workplace and businesses who install level 2 chargers for their staff. There are many different levels and options available for public chargers. You can put in a unit that is what we call dumb. It doesn't have technology. It doesn't have a brain. EV users use it for free. If their employer is in a place that it makes sense to be able to offer free charging for their staff, then they would still get the $750. If they put in a smart charger, which has the ability to collect payment and ability for usage, then certainly, they would get the $750 back. It just comes with a little bit more expenses. So if you do have an employer interested, just have them pop an email to us at Green Mountain Power, and we can connect with them about the incentive program offerings for you guys to be able to charge at work as opposed to just at home. While at home is the cheapest place to do so, it's comforting to know if you need to charge at work because you have errands to run after or such and have that option available. It's comforting to know that that is there for you as well. So our toll-free number, all of this information is on our website as well. Should you acquire an electric vehicle and want to submit for your rebate, we actually upgraded our process recently. You can just go to greenmountainpower.com, go to residential rebates and programs. You go to the electric vehicle section and you'll see an apply for rebate button. It's a hyperlink. You'll load your bill of sale, you'll load your W-9, you'll load your Vermont registration, and then it comes through to us the next day. We're going to review it, process and accept it, or let you know if something's missing, and send you that EV home charger electronic agreement should you opt to have that. The business innovation team. So for those workplaces who are interested in EV chargers, business innovations at greenmountainpower.com. They can just pop an email over and say, hey, I would love more information about your EV charger incentives. Can we schedule some time to chat? Dave mentioned that GMP has some other benefits out there. So we have EV incentives, we have EV charger incentives, but we also have heat pump incentives that you receive at time of order or time of your contractor orders and purchases. We have electric mower incentives, $50 off an electric push mower. You receive that back as a check form from us. Submit your paperwork. You have to buy locally in order to get that. We also have other yard equipment like leaf blowers, chainsaws, weed whackers. When you would do bundles, you get additional refunds. We have electric bike incentive program, which is really cool too. I see more and more bikes on the roads today being used for your daily commute is the purpose of that concept. It's a $200 off your bike purchase with partnering dealerships. So the way we have worked with this program is when you buy from a partnering dealership, again, the list of partnering dealerships is on our website, then they will give you $200 off the purchase price and we reimburse them directly. We have partnered with these local businesses for a couple of reasons to help build the Vermont economy. And those local businesses are going to have a slight conversation or kind of like in casual conversation about the fact that this is being used for commuting vehicle and reducing the greenhouse gases. So trying to help build the local economy, keep the sales local as opposed to feeding Amazon and the World Wide Web. So those lists are available again on our website. If you're not sure what bike would be best for you, V-Bike has great bike solutions so that you can just have conversations and set up a time to chat with them about what options might exist for you to purchase locally. And then the other wheels incentive is electric motorcycles. So we have a $500 electric motorcycle incentive, which again, we have partnering dealers on those, but there's only 2 in Vermont who sell electric bikes. So we do allow you to purchase a bike out of the state of Vermont, and then we will give you a cashback incentive when you do that. Short of that, that's all I got. So I'm going to pass it back.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen. I have to confess, I hadn't thought much about electric motorcycles, so that's really not something on my radar. Well, thank you both, Dave and Jen for those presentations. They complemented each other really well. I think I definitely learned some new stuff here. So thank you for that. Questions have been coming the whole time, as I expected. This is like such a great hot topic. And Dave, I have seen that you've been in the chat answering responding to some specific inquiries. But we're probably gonna go ahead and start from the beginning, Michael and I, and read some of these questions and pose some of these questions. And if there's anything you feel like you've already covered, just tell us that people should read the chat, okay? I'll go ahead and get started if that sounds good, Michael, and then you can take it next. Okay, excellent. This is one that comes up all the time. I think it came up a few times and you did address it, Dave, but we should pose it anyway. The trade-off of driving an electric vehicle, is it worth the cost of mining for the battery components?
So, I mean, it's a many layer question, and it can depend on the vehicle actually in terms of the actual impact. So for example, Tesla uses a little different battery chemistry than some of the other automakers that uses less cobalt, which is one of the minerals that has a lot of human rights issues associated with the extraction in Congo, which is the primary source of it, not the only one, but one of the largest suppliers. So a lot of, so there's sort of two layers. There's reducing the use of those minerals, which some automakers are already doing. And then there's making sure that if you are using minerals, that it's being done in a responsible way. And that as vehicles these batteries reach the end of their useful life in the vehicles, that they can either find a second life, a stationary energy storage, so like backup power, buffering, renewables, and then ultimately that the valuable materials in the cells can be recycled and recovered and used in future batteries. So there's a lot of work happening on this front. I put 2 links in the chat to some additional articles on this topic. I'm happy to talk more about it, but it's, there's a lot to unpack basically. But at the end of the day, even when you factor in the sort of greenhouse gas footprint of the extraction and production of the vehicles, including the batteries, you still see that 60 to 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to a gasoline vehicle over the life. So, my opinion is that, it is worth it, but I certainly understand they're valuable and very valid opinions on the other side of that question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. The next question is, it's hard to find a 4-wheel drive EV. So
it's getting easier actually. I mean, so it's a lot of Vermonters buy used vehicles, and there aren't a lot of used EVs available because it's a relatively new technology, and especially the all-wheel drive models have tended to be a little bit more of a recent development. So it's certainly hard to find them in the used market. And as I noted in the chat, right now there's a lot of supply chain issues with vehicle production. So it's hard to find any vehicle right now, and prices are up. Even used vehicle prices have actually appreciated. So it's a very unusual market right now for people who are shopping for a car. So it's a challenge. There are some other questions about availability in the chat. So, it's probably not going away for at least 6 months, and it could be significantly longer before the auto market kind of returns to more of a normal situation. But there are theoretically over 30 models available now with all-wheel drive, and the Drive Electric Vermont Vehicle Comparison Tool does have a filter, a little drop down that you can use to show vehicles that have all-wheel drive as a standard feature, and then some vehicles it's an optional feature, so you pay a little bit extra and they put another motor in the vehicle. So if you toggle between the standard and optional and the all-wheel drive, and I'll put a link in the chat just directly to that page, you'll see there actually are quite a few all-wheel drive models available now. Certainly, as I've been doing this work for 10 years, this all-wheel drive is a perennial question for, understandably so with Vermonters. And back when we started, there really were basically no options. So now we're starting to see quite a variety.
Thank you.
You addressed this, Dave, in your talk. I believe you said, well, the question is, we live in a cold climate. What battery efficiency loss can we expect? I believe you said to pessimistically or optimistically go for half the range, but what's your
Yep,
thought?
that's the worst case that we generally advise people on. And, if it's not, and that's like a 5 below morning, the vehicle's been outside. If you have a garage where the vehicle's inside, if it's not that cold, you shouldn't see that much of a hit. And again, there are some model specific differences that are detailed on the Drive Electric Vermont resource that I mentioned. So for folks who are doing a lot of long distance driving in winter, encourage you to check that out. But if your daily driving is 50 miles or less, as is the case with the majority of Vermonters, pretty much any vehicle offering over 200 miles of range should be adequate for your needs year round.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Michael, I was going to skip the next two.
Yeah. Those are kind of going over the same ground with the environmental costs of battery production and the elements involved, as well as the four-wheel drive. So the next question would be, can we expect battery stations that replace your batteries on the road so you have as much mileage range as you'd like?
There have been some companies working on that, but I wouldn't expect them anytime soon. Where you might see a little bit more standard, because automakers are all using different chemistries and shapes and sizes of battery packs, so they're not interchangeable. Where you might see Tesla experimented with this, but they basically stopped doing it. I think the more likely candidates for this type of treatment are like electric bikes or maybe motorcycles, mopeds. Might be a little bit easier to come up with a standardized option there, but I wouldn't expect it for the passenger vehicles in the near future.
Thank you.
This question is, sorry to ask this question, but what is the story with hydrogen powered vehicles?
It can be a long story, but in my presentation, there were additional columns for hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, and there's different ways of making the hydrogen. Right now, a lot of hydrogen comes from natural gas, and if that's how you're producing hydrogen, then the climate benefits are fairly minimal, frankly. It's certainly much higher emissions than comparable EVs. If you're producing hydrogen from renewable energy, which is the hope for solution in the long term, then it's fairly comparable to an EV, but their hydrogen fueling infrastructure is non-existent in Vermont, and basically in the Northeast. It's a little bit better in California, but it's certainly lagging electric vehicle infrastructure even there. So, there may be some possibilities for hydrogen in the future, but if you're looking for a vehicle in the next few years, I think more than likely, it's going to be an EV or a gasoline vehicle, not hydrogen.
So the next question is another battery question. Is it hard on a battery to run it all the way out of charge?
Depends on the specific model. I mean, typically, even if the car says the battery is completely depleted, the automakers actually still have a buffer on the actual battery cell where the cells aren't completely depleted, because it can be harmful to really run down those cells all the way. But the manufacturers do lots of testing to make sure that they stand behind their warranties, which is usually 8-year, 100,000 miles, in some cases longer for new EV batteries. So they have sophisticated battery management systems that kind of keep the charge within the ideal range for long-term life of the battery. But that said, there are some automakers that suggest maybe you don't charge to 100% all of the time, so kind of charge to 80, 90% and only use that extra top end 10% capacity of the battery, if you're on a longer trip or something like that. So, that's a situation where you really have to read the owner's manual and maybe do a little bit of research, or feel free to reach out to us to Drive Electric, and we can dive in a little bit more on any model specific issues. I can also offer, in terms of plug-in hybrids, they're made to run the batteries down completely, so no worries in terms of using all of your electric range in a plug-in hybrid and then, you know, plugging it in. So those batteries are made to do that.
Thank you.
This is a comment and a question. So the app is great, but what if many cars are before you at that charging station? You may have a long wait.
Absolutely. You know, and that's where we need more charging as more Vermonters and tourists are driving EVs. So, you know, if a fast charger typically is maybe 30 minutes, depending, but, you know, roughly you're going to be at a fast charger for 30 minutes and you'll be looking at maybe an 80% charge in that period of time. So if you arrive at a fast charger and if there's only one fast charger and there's somebody ahead of you, you could be looking at 30 minutes roughly, maybe longer in the winter. And if there are a couple of vehicles ahead of you, could be longer. Tesla has dealt with this by putting in, you know, at least 8 fast charging ports at their fast charging locations, in some cases many more. So, you know, the only issues that Tesla drivers typically run into is maybe on big travel weekends like Thanksgiving time where everybody's on the road, and there can be congestion at some of their fast chargers in that situation. So, you know, the hope is that as other automakers are scaling up and state and others are, GMP and others are investing in charging, that it will be a more seamless experience for the non-Tesla EV drivers as well. But you know, it is, I think today it's fairly rare that you would have that kind of congestion at a charging station, but it can certainly happen.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the next question is about the federal tax credit. Can it be spread over 2 to 3 years if your tax burden is less than 7,500?
Yeah, I did answer this in the chat, but basically no, unfortunately. But I will also say that I'm not a tax professional, and we do encourage people to consult with a tax professional if they have questions about the tax credit, because there's a lot of issues that can come up based on someone's individual circumstances. So, but generally speaking, it's not something that can be carried forward.
Thank you. This question is, we are off grid, but considering extending the grid 3 poles to provide power for electric vehicles, this will cost $15,000 for 3 poles, Green Mountain Power. Is there anything to help / lower that cost?
No, Jen, you have.
I cannot answer that question. I'm not a designer. I don't know of any offsets for that. If you would have to work with whoever you worked with initially to get that $15,000 offset quote. I really don't know, but nothing that I'm aware of, unless Dave, do you know of any grants coming in for residential individuals?
I know there's been talk of not so much line extensions, which is the question here, although it may be similar, but more so for people who maybe are in older homes that their electric panel is maxed out. And so it'd be hard for them to add a higher powered EV charger without significant cost to put in maybe a new panel or other equipment. And I know the Climate Action Plan did include a recommendation to provide some support for lower income Vermonters who are, you know, looking to make those types of investments in heat pumps and EVs and things like that, but their electric service is maxed out. I'm not exactly sure the status of that. I think there may be some proposals and legislation moving through now, certainly nothing currently available though. So may want to talk to your legislators if you know, you have feedback for them on potential state programs to support things like that.
Yeah, I believe what you're speaking to, Dave, is electrifying your house. So as people work towards more electric sources at their house, so like the heat pumps and electric vehicles and moving away from more gas, and you need to do panel load upgrades, then yes, they're working on a grant program. My understanding is no sooner than 18 months, maybe even 2 to 3 years.
Thank you. I've also looked into this question myself. I'm off grid and I found no answer. So no programs, if that's helpful, but. That's it.
So the next question is, does the percent transportation include freight or commercial? I'm assuming it means percent transportation that's being provided by EV vehicles at this point.
So that if it's related to the slide I have on emissions, the transportation emissions about 45% of Vermont's total. And within transportation emissions, it's about, I think it's 80% roughly are light duty vehicles, so passenger cars primarily. And then the other 20% is more heavy duty, so diesel trucks, things like that. So the majority of emissions are personal vehicles, but there certainly are other contributors. And the state does have, is working on what's called a medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicle action plan, or ZEV action plan, which is looking at options for more electrification in that space.
Thank you. I was just scrolling to the next question is related to the person who lives in New Hampshire and incentives beyond the federal incentives. I was just trying to find your answer, Dave, but I couldn't. Do you want to summarize really quickly?
The only other incentive beyond the federal tax credit in New Hampshire that I know of is New Hampshire Electric Co-op program. So if you're in their territory, there should be hopefully something for you, but otherwise not aware of anything. I did include a link to the U.S. Department of Energy's sort of inventory of all the different incentives for New Hampshire. So that might be a helpful resource.
Great.
Is it worth moving to Vermont to get the incentives?
Yes.
Let's see, I'm just looking for the next question here. There's just a couple of links.
I have it as Ariel's question. What's the origin? Is that the one? What's the origin of electrons with overnight charging? Natural gas, that one?
Yeah.
So if your electric source is Green Mountain Power, you can find our grid breakup, I guess. So as I mentioned in the presentation, we are 100% renewables, or 68%, working towards 100% renewable. So the source, I don't know all of the details about every source function versus at night versus during the day. If you have a solar at your house, then you would be offsetting up mostly based on solar. But I don't understand what your question is on natural gas aspect.
There is still a fair amount of natural gas in the New England grid generally. I know GMP has contracts in place to, it sounds like, not use that if you're carbon free. But even an EV powered, for somebody who's not in GMP, an EV powered by natural gas is the equivalent of roughly a 70, 80 mile per gallon gasoline vehicle. So even EVs powered by some of those fossil fuels that are still being used on the grid can be cleaner than gasoline vehicles because of the efficiencies involved. Although we would love to see more renewable and low carbon for sure.
So the next question is, would Green Mountain Power pay to install a 240 volt charger at my home?
We do not. We provide the free level 2 charger, but the customer has to have the electrician do the install. However, that installation cost is 30% federal tax credit. So keep your invoice, and then when you file your taxes next year, you'll be able to get 30% federal tax credit for the installation.
Actually, sorry to say that,
I
think that lapsed at the end of last year. And
I heard it was extended. Bummer.
They were talking about extending it. I hadn't heard that they did though. It was part of the Build Back Better bill that has not moved forward. So it could come back.
I told you I learned something from Dave every time I talk with him.
and a lot of times that has lapsed several times over the years and been renewed retroactively. So it's entirely possible that, if you've got a charger installed next week, that you could get a tax credit for it. But I don't think that would be guaranteed as of today.
All right, thank you. Any idea of book value pricing adjustment for a used Bolt with new battery packs?
I think it's early days yet. So for folks who may not be familiar, the Chevrolet Bolt is an all-electric vehicle that has had a battery recall, where GM is replacing all the batteries and all the bolts that have ever been made, and that's starting with the 2017 model year. So, and those older model year vehicles are getting the newest battery pack, which actually has a little bit more range than they did when new even. So theoretically, it should, add some significant value to bolts, but it's hard to say at this point, because bolts are still going through the recall. I don't think we have enough information to say, how it's affecting the book value.
My understanding from a Bolt owner is they're also getting extended warranty and a longer range. So if they have a 250-mile range, their range is going to be bigger and better, and they're getting an extended warranty on those upgrades.
That's great. So the next question is, are the charger details applicable also to hybrids or just EVs?
So for the plug-in hybrids, they can use level 1 and 2 charging. Most plug-in hybrids do not have fast charging capability because you have the gasoline. So it's not, automakers figure it's not worth including fast charging capability and some of the issues associated with it if they have that gasoline option. So the only exception to that for a new vehicle on sale today, I think, is the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid. But basically all the other plug-in hybrids, you're not going to be using fast charging. Another thing that we haven't really talked about is the cost of public charging. So you will pay more for public charging typically than charging at home. There are a few that are free. I saw somebody in the chat mention that, but vast majority of charging in the state does have fees associated with it. It's going to be a little bit higher than what you pay at home for level 2, but significantly higher for fast charging because of some of the expenses involved. So it's another reason why I think some of the plug-in hybrid manufacturers don't include the fast charging capability because of the higher cost of it.
All right, thank you. Are there any incentives for landlords to install a charger at their property? As a renter, I'm concerned about not having a reliable place to charge here in Burlington.
The Burlington Electric Department has had a program in Burlington, and I know GMP has done some work with multifamily housing. The state actually just closed applications for a new grant program supporting charging at multifamily housing and apartments, specifically geared toward apartments with lower income residents. So should be some announcements, hopefully in the next month or so in terms of the funding for that. But I believe City of Burlington did apply and is planning, if they're funded, to put in some additional public charging in some of the neighborhoods of Burlington that meet the state's requirements. And there is significant additional funding in the current state transportation bill and budget that's working its way through the legislature that will hopefully continue and expand availability of that program. So certainly there is awareness among policymakers that there's need to support landlords in terms of the cost of installing that charging, but could be a little while before another round of grants is available because of the way the funding cycles work.
Thanks. The next question is more of an existential question. Who would want a very quiet motorcycle?
I knew you'd read that, Michael.
Or maybe it's a rhetorical question. I don't know, but
I guess it'd be like cars now. When they're in slow, like driving through a parking lot, they have an engine noise. So I guess it'd be those motorcycles have a little bit of noise to them, just for that reason.
Maybe they have a motorcycle radio that plays an accompanying engine sound that you can turn on while you're driving along.
I saw that there was a question about the recording of this meeting. I should have it available by tomorrow to send out to folks, just so you all know. The next question is, what is the typical charge for the use of an on-the-road charger? Let's say to get another 250 miles of drive. I'm not quite sure what it means. Do you guys know?
I assume you mean length of time. Go ahead, Dave.
I was just the price, I'm guessing. So, it depends if you're using the level 2 charger, which is a little more affordable, as I was saying. But for 250 miles of range, you're going to be there for, 7-8 hours, typically, maybe even longer. So that's really, if you're stopped somewhere, maybe your hotel has charging or something like that. But for most people, if you're on a longer road trip, you're probably going to want to use fast charging. And, it is more expensive. It's going to depend on the charging operator, but typically for sort of an 80% charge, depending on your vehicles, might be a little less than 250 miles of range. You're going to be spending a half an hour, and that'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of $20. Could be a little more or less, depending. Some of the automakers do have programs where they bundle in some free fast charging with an EV purchase. So, for example, Volkswagen with their ID4, they provide 3 years of free charging at their subsidiary Electrify America's fast charging, which right now we don't have any Electrify America fast chargers in Vermont, but if you're traveling out of state, they certainly are out there. And, that could be a significant savings to you if you can benefit from that program.
So I think the next question is, can Tesla chargers charge other makes of batteries?
Short answer is no, especially for fast chargers. So Tesla's fast charging network, the supercharger network, has a different plug format than the other automakers use. And so it's not available to non-Tesla drivers. Tesla has said, and they're piloting in Europe, options to open access to other types of vehicles. It's a little bit easier for them in Europe because they use the same plug type in Europe as other manufacturers, unlike in the US. So in the US, it's going to require some kind of adapter change in how Tesla sets up their fast charging stations. But it is something that's, may come to pass eventually, but as of today, Tesla fast chargers are only for Tesla drivers.
Thank you. There's a kind of related question. Is there a compatible portable generator that one could carry to use on trips for charging?
You would want, I think you would want a fairly high quality generator that has, a good power quality coming out to charge an EV. But, as long as you have that, I think a lot of them should work fine for level 1 charging. I'm not aware, there's probably options for level 2 charging, but you'd be talking about, I think, a bigger, noisier, more obnoxious experience. If you're doing that, I think generally, would recommend folks, charging is getting more and more ubiquitous. So hopefully you could find charging where you need to go and not have to haul around a generator. But if you needed it, I know that there are some folks who have used that in the past. I would suggest that before doing it, do some online research, see if you can kind of find somebody who's used a generator with your vehicle or something like that, because there may be some specifics for different models that would be important to keep in mind.
Thank you. So the next question is GMP's electricity really all renewable, or am I still using natural gas or hydro power for my EV?
Well, Hydro-Quebec is water. It's green. It's hydro. I'm good at answering these questions, right? I don't know what our draw of natural gas is. I know that grid graph is on our website. I can find it and share it. But I was given this information from our marketing team that we are 100% renewable. We're 68% renewable, 100%. Working towards the 100%. We're getting there. So no, we are 100%. We are 68% working towards the 100%.
Yeah, and if you send a graphic or a page on that, Jen, I can send it out to the folks who are registered for this, if that works. Because there's another questions of electrons at night are issued from natural gas, yes? Which I don't know what kind of storage capability you have for other sources that then are used at night. I don't know, it's kind of a technical question. But yeah,
I
I'm
would
happy to
have
send
to
out
hook you up
information.
with somebody on our team that works on that side of the program stuff.
Yeah,
That is a totally different level of.
Yeah.
definitely. Well, that's all the questions. We just went through them, I believe. And I see Dave just put the energy mix of
Thank you, Dave.
DMP in the chat. Thanks, Dave. And definitely you two send me anything that you want sent to folks as a follow-up. Thank you both very, very much. It has been, we ran over time a bit, so I really appreciate you both staying on to answer questions. There are so many questions about this topic, as there always are. I was asked quickly before we go to share 2 upcoming electric vehicle events in our area. So on Saturday, April 23rd from 10 to 1, the Red Barn near the Heartland Library is going to be hosting an electric vehicle show and tell. So you can go chat with your neighbors who have EVs and plug-in hybrids. Very exciting. Printed info and refreshments available. So that's coming from the Heartland Energy Committee. And in Norwich, they're also having an event. Or is that the same?
Different.
Different, right? Yeah, I believe it's different. For Thetford, Norwich, Hartford, and Sharontown Energy Committees. So there are some in-person events if folks want to get off Zoom and go and look at some electric vehicles in person.
It's a great opportunity to talk to owners and hear about their experience. So, you know, if you're thinking about it, those are great things to join if you can. And definitely appreciate everybody's questions. And I know Jen and I are happy to, you know, if you think of something later that you wanted to ask us, feel free to reach out, or you can always contact the Drive Electric Vermont, you know, customer inquiry. We've got a form on our website. You can send us questions if you think of anything in the future.
Thank you very much. This is great.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
David.
you guys for having us.
Okay. Have a good night, everyone.
Yeah. Good night.
You too.
Thanks, everybody.